Shalom Aleichem everyone, it's Erev Shabbos, Chazon, Tisha B'Av is around the corner, and a number of you over the week asked me to address Tisha B'Av in this week's video, Dvar Torah. That's what I wanted to do. A number of questions arise when it comes to Tisha B'Av. Number one, why is it that when it comes to Tisha B'Av we find that the Avelus in the morning is more intense than the Avelus in the afternoon? In the morning we don't wear talis and tefillin. We sit on the floor. We don't say Kaddish Teskabel. As the day passes through Chatzos, where Parshat, the Avelus is still there, but we seem to recede a little bit from that sense of Avelus. Why exactly do we do that? What's the rationale to recede from the intensity of the Avelus as the day progresses? That's question number one. Question number two is that there's a big issue. We know that in a normal year, the Avelus also persists into the next day, the day after Tisha B'Av, into Yud Av. Why is that? Because we're told that although the beginning of the destruction happened on Tisha B'Av, the Beis HaMikdash was burning down on Yud B'Av. In fact, some Amoraim even indicate that Yud Av should have a greater sense of Avelus than Tes B'Av. After all, that's when the actual Churban of the Beis HaMikdash took place. In fact, Rabbi Abin in the Yushalmi in Maseches Tainis indicates he used to fast 2 days, both Tes and Yud Av. And Tosas in Maseches Megillah Daf Hey Beis indicates that when the Gemara tells us Rebbe wanted to be Oker Tisha B'Av, it doesn't mean that Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av in its entirety, but rather he wanted to shift the commemoration of Tisha B'Av from Tisha B'Av to Yud B'Av, because in fact that was the day of the actual destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Moreover, we find that Rabbi Yochanan actually went ahead and he commemorated Tisha B'Av on Yud B'Av. So why is it that we actually have our position, and again how we go ahead and commemorate Tisha B'Av is on Tisha B'Av and not Yud B'Av? Why not Yud B'Av when the actual destruction of the Beis HaMikdash took place? Finally, a third issue is there is a Kapitel Tehillim Ayin Tes, which opens up as follows: Mizmor LaAsaf, a song to Asaf, Elokim Ro'ui Goyim B'Nachlasecha. Goyim B'Nachlasecha. Goyim came into your Nachal, into your domain, and Timu Es Heichal Kadshecha. It's discussing the tomb of the Beis HaMikdash, the tomb of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The Medrash is very bothered. Question number 3, why does it say Mizmor LaAsaf? In fact, it should say Kina LaAsaf, a lamentation to Asaf. Why a Mizmor, a song? What exactly is the song that the Beis HaMikdash became tummy, was defiled, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? Why is that a Mizmor and not a Kina? So these are the 3 questions that you find. Rashi Maseches Kiddushin, also quoted by Tosfos, Daf Lamed Aleph and Beis, citing the Medrash, explains why is it a Mizmor LaAsaf and not a Kina LaAsaf? Because, as follows: V'darash kach she'amar Asaf shira al shekila hakadosh baruch hu chamaso be'etzim ve'avonim shebabeiso umito kach hotir pleita b'Yisrael she'umalei kach lo nishtar misoni Yisrael sorry. The Medrash explains, as Rashi brings down, that really the situation in Klal Yisrael on that day, 1,944 years ago, was very, very precarious. We were on the destiny, on the precipice of utter destruction, utter annihilation. And we didn't know how it was going to turn out. Klal Yisrael was in a very, very precarious situation. Was it just going to be the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, or was it going to be the entire destruction of the Jewish people? Was anything going to be saved whatsoever? Was it going to be a total genocide, or just Eitzim Ba'avonim? And as the day progressed, as we transitioned from Tisha B'Av into Yud B'Av, says the Medrash, it became clear to Bnei Yisrael that it wasn't going to be an utter genocide. There were going to be Jews that survived the attack, and although terrible tragedy, destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Kila Chamaso al Eitzim V'Avonim, Hashem's anger, if you will, was dissipated, was expressed on the stones and sticks of the Beis HaMikdash, on the wooden stones, rather than on the bones and flesh of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were going to survive. And this became evident as the day was transitioning from Tisha B'Av into Yud B'Av. So although Yud B'Av was the day where the actual Beis HaMikdash came down, but there was an element of nechama on Yud B'Av. There was even an element of nechama as the day progresses on Tisha B'Av. And that's why it's Mizmor LaAsaf and not Kina LaAsaf, because there was a silver lining. Although a day of tremendous, tremendous tragedy, but even within the tragedy, there was a sense of nechama. There was a sense of comfort that Hashem was still with us, Avinu Shebashamayim. He took his anger out on Eitzim V'Avanim, but the Jewish people were going to make it. We're going to survive. Hence, we go ahead and diminish Avelus as the day progresses to reflect a little bit of that Nechama. And even though Yud B'Av was a day of destruction of Beis HaMikdash, but we commemorate Tisha B'Av because again, by Yud B'Av, already we had that sense that we were going to go ahead and make it through. Many Talmidim ask me, and I was asked a number of times this week, how do we connect to Tisha B'Av? How do we connect to the destruction of Beis HaMikdash? We never had the Beis HaMikdash. We never experienced Beis HaMikdash. We don't even know what it's all about. Life is pretty good. Why is it that we have to go ahead and have such a tough time in the summer and the fasting and so forth? How exactly do we relate? So I want to share with you a medrash I think ties this all together. Not a medrash, a mashal, a story. The mashal goes as follows. There was a couple that got married, and for many, many, many years they could not have children. 10, 15 years, they tried and they tried all the methods, they couldn't have children. Finally, 16, 17 years into their marriage, the woman conceived, and she became pregnant. A tremendous sense of joy, happiness, that she actually, after all this time, she became pregnant. 9 months later, it's time to go ahead and have the baby. She's rushed into the delivery room, and the doctor, as they're working on bringing the baby into this world, the doctor comes to the husband and the wife and says, it's not looking good. It's not good. There's a grim situation. I cannot save both the mother and the child. The labor is not going well. There's a lot of complications here. If I go ahead and save the child, the mother is at great, great risk. If I save the mother, then the child is at great, great risk. We cannot go ahead and save both. What do you want to do? This is a mashal, not a true story. So the couple had a quick discussion and they said, listen, we've been trying so hard to have this child, 17 years, to go ahead and walk away from it now. The mother said, I'm never going to be able to live with myself, not having given this child a chance to live. I want you to go ahead. I want to go ahead and have the child. And if it means I die, so be it. So that's exactly what happens. They made the decision, and the child is born. And unfortunately, the mother doesn't make it. The mother is lost, and the child lives on. And they go ahead, the father raised the child year after year, and 13 years later, it's time for the child to have his bar mitzvah. And he puts on tefillin as a bar chiyuva for the first time, and the father says, we're going to go ahead, and we're going to daven by your mother's kever. We're going to go to the Beis HaKvaros, because after all, the day of his bar mitzvah is also the day of his mother's yortzeit. They go to the Beis HaKvaros, and they start to daven by the Beis HaKvaros, and now, for the first time as a bar mitzvah boy, the son is going to say Kaddish. And he starts to say Yiskadal, Yiskadash, he starts to say that Kaddish. And all of a sudden, in the trees above, there's a very colorful bird that's fluttering around. And in the middle of the Kaddish, he gets distracted. He looks up, he loses his place in the siddur, and finally the father has to point out to him where he is, and he continues with the Kaddish. He gets a few lines further on, there's a train blowing its horn in the distance. Again, the child picks up his head and goes ahead and starts listening to the train, loses his place in the Kaddish. And the father once again has to put him back on track, and finally, he makes it through the Kaddish. After davening is over, the father says to the son, my dear son, I don't understand. It's the first time you're saying Kaddish for your mother as a bar chiyuva. Today's your bar mitzvah, today's your mother's yortzeit. Why couldn't you get to the Kaddish? Why were you so easily distracted? You couldn't focus, your mind was everywhere else but on the Kaddish. And the son says to the father, Abba, I never knew my mother. I never met my mother. I never spent time with my mother. I never spoke to my mother. So I don't really feel such a loss. I don't feel emotional about this day. So it's very easy for me to get distracted by so many other things. The father said to the son, it's true. You never met your mother. You never spent time with her. You never talked to her. You never played games with her. You were never with her. But understand very well that you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the tremendous selfless act that your mother did for you. 13 years ago, it could have been you, it could have been your mother. Your mother was Moseres Nefesh, so you could live in this world. And the least you can do is to go ahead and recognize that tremendous act of Mesiras Nefesh and go ahead and have a proper sense of Hakaras Hatov and recognition of what she gave up so you could be here. That's the mashal. We, of course, are that son. True, we've never, ever, unfortunately, experienced the Beis HaMikdash. We never experienced the Korban Tamid, the Korban Musaf, the Korban Pesach, the Nesachim. We never saw the Kohen Gadol come out of the Kodesh Kadashim on Yom Kippurim. We've never experienced so much of authentic Yadus. We never had that palpable sense of true Shechina. It's 100% true. We're that child who is so easily distracted by so many other things on the yortzeit of the Beis HaMikdash's destruction. Hashem had a choice. Hashem could have either been mistalek his Shechina, remove his Shechina from the world, or destroyed us. And Hashem chose to take out his anger on the Eitzim ve'Avonim, on the Beis HaMikdash, and remove his Shechina, which albeit exceptionally painful, but at the same time enabled us to be in this world, to live in this world, and to continue be'ezras Hashem to prosper. 3 weeks out of the year, 9 days out of the year, 1 day out of the year, to go ahead and recognize that it was us or the Beis HaMikdash, to understand that dichotomy. And yes, Tisha B'Av has that nechama, but at the same time, we have to go ahead and recognize and be makir tov, and understand and connect to what was lost, to our mother, and what was given up, what we're missing, but at the same time understand that there's that nechama, that sense that we can continue building ourselves, building our future, and be'ez Hashem, rebuilding our Beis HaMikdash, so we can go ahead and have that sense of Avinu Sheba Shamayim, that kesher with Ima Sheba Shamayim, Abba Sheba Shamayim, and Mirz Hashem prosper in the future. Have a great Shabbos.